Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jenna Natali, Events Manager at Long Island Business News, and we will start our next episode of LIBN Now in just a few moments. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jenna Natali, Events Manager at Long Island Business News, welcoming you to our weekly live Zoomcast of LIBN Now. Thank you for tuning in to our 1-hour special on the state of the commercial real estate industry. Today's co-hosts will be LIBN editor and associate publisher Joe Dowd and LIBN's real estate reporter David Winselberg. Our guests today include 4 experts in the Long Island real estate industry who will discuss what lies ahead for the commercial market. As always, LIBN welcomes any and all questions before and during the live program. Zoom participants may submit their questions at any time by clicking Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And now, please welcome LIBN's Joe Dowd, editor and associate publisher at Long Island Business News.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Joe Dowd, editor and associate publisher at LIBN. Thank you for joining us for our 1-hour special edition today of LIBN Now, focusing on the state of commercial real estate on Long Island and beyond. We have with us today 4 prominent experts who will offer their insights on the subject that impacts all Long Islanders. And to introduce them, veteran journalist and LIBN's resident real estate expert, my colleague, David Winselberg. Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Today we have some really good experts to talk about the state of the commercial real estate industry on Long Island and the effects of the recent pandemic and whatever changes are in store. I'm going to introduce them all together, and then we'll start the program. We have David Panetta, who's the Executive Managing Director for Cushman & Wakefield on Long Island. We have Jeffrey Schwartzberg, who's the co-founder and managing principal of Premier Commercial Real Estate. And we have John Thomas and Mark Walsh, who are principals of Select Real Equity Advisors. Guys, thanks for joining us today.
And welcome.
Thank you.
So we're going to start off today. Everybody here is an expert in a bunch of different sectors, but some people have a little bit more expertise in some sectors than others. So we're gonna start off with Dave Panetta and the office sector. But this question is going to be asked of everyone, and it's the big question: how has the coronavirus pandemic impacted the commercial real estate sector? And we're going to start off with the office market. So, Dave, if you want to just go ahead and start it on that one.
Sure. So thank you for having me. So the office market was doing well, thankfully, prior to COVID. And there's been very little development, new speculative construction in the office market, probably for the past 15 years in any big degree. So we've been working with existing supply and not really adding new supply, which was considered a problem before. Now that COVID has been here, we are sort of looking at a number of things. We have companies that are looking to exit, the New York City market. And fortunately, this time, Long Island has invested in some of the structural assets that it needed to compete that way. And some of it was some of the transit-oriented development sites here on the island where there's been market rate apartments were developed around train stations, giving young people nice places, interesting places to live, with the clubhouse, with, amenities. The other thing is, triple track, double track, which has been moving along. And in 2 years, we should have the East Side access. So all of those things have made Long Island much more attractive. So if you go back to Sandy, and even before that, 9/11, where 9/11 obviously was another horrible situation where you had companies looking to Long Island, looking to New Jersey, Westchester, Connecticut, and Long Island just didn't have the infrastructure to be able to supply a spot for these office users. This time is different, and I think we'll be doing better going forward.
So Dave, a lot of people are questioning the need for office space. So you have all these people working from home, even before the pandemic. I don't know what the percentage was, but then you have more people working from home during the pandemic. And a lot of people are saying, well, a company is going to be able to learn to live without, without that office space or with less office space. How is that going to affect the market, and what other factors do you think may join with that?
So right now, before this pandemic, 5 to 7% of employees were working from home. So that was prior to this. I think in some job functions, you're able to work from home where you don't need to have a collaboration with other people in your office. But I think for the most case, that's not the situation for most job functions. So even if we go from 5 to 7% to 10 to 15% and double it, that's not going to be that impactful on a negative side to the office market, especially when you tie it into, corporations in order to constantly cut, costs. We went from, in the past 5 years, we went from 235 square feet per employee on average to 185 square feet per employee. So I think we're going to reverse that and go back up. So if you have more people working from home, but now we need more square footage to house X number of people, I don't think we're going to be negatively impacted on Long Island.
Oh, okay, very good. So Jeff, we're going to ask the same question of you. How has the pandemic affected the industrial real estate market?
I think the simple answer is the smoke has not yet cleared. The jury is still out. But I can tell you, as of very recently, the demand for industrial real estate does not seem to have been adversely impacted as a result of COVID-19. In fact, although the market was extremely quiet for the 3-month period between, let's say, middle of March and middle of June, we've seen the activity level come back very, very strong. And there actually seems to be some built up demand and momentum, perhaps to even surpass the demand that we had prior to COVID-19. There's still very low vacancies, limited inventory. The flock from the boroughs is continuing. There certainly are some adjustments as a result of the virus. Some companies are shrinking and some companies are growing. So far, we've seen more growing than shrinking. But I could tell you during that period, companies were not making commitments.
So there was a pause. But I could also see that the demand for last mile distribution, warehousing, and distribution centers has probably even increased. It was very strong before the pandemic, and it's probably got just even stronger because of all the online commerce, of all the the e-commerce, of all the online shopping, and that's just exponentially increased during the pandemic. So I'm supposing that the demand is stronger than ever for those type of facilities.
We've seen very high demand, particularly in the last 2 months, from e-commerce businesses that are expanding their businesses, mostly coming out of the boroughs. Many of them have expanded as a result of the virus. And there seems to be a sentiment amongst a number of these companies that there's going to be another wave, which is going to cause even more need for increased facilities.
Okay, that's great. And let's go to John and Mark. Obviously, same question. How has the pandemic affected the multifamily and retail investment markets?
Dave, thanks for having John and I. It's good to be here with Mr. Panetta and Jeff. What we've seen early on here, and I think Jeff said it best, there's really an adjustment going on right now in all the different markets. The office market is adjusting, industrial's adjusting, retail's adjusting, and of course, multifamily. On the retail side, there's been a wave of bankruptcies and so forth that are going to greatly affect the market going forward. And it's going to create a repurposing of a lot of the real estate that's in existence. When someone like Simon Properties gets together and buys an anchor tenant like JCPenney, or takes a look at buying Lord & Taylor, that creates, a new piece of real estate that has to be repurposed. So part of that could become office space, which Dave's an expert in. Part of it could become the last mile distribution center type of stuff, which Jeff and I and John have had some experience with. And across the board, it's going to be an adjustment period for the retail sector. I'll let John talk a little bit about the multifamily side, which we're extremely active in as well. And that's a market that for Long Island has always been probably the number one strongest asset class historically because of the supply-demand inequality that's existed for a very long time. But I'll let John dig in on that one a little bit.
Before we jump to John, I just want to, expand and pull the thread on the big boxes. Sure. I've read recently that Simon is also in talks with Amazon to create fulfillment centers from some of these giant department stores. Have you heard that?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the adjustment and the repurposing of the real estate. So if Simon jumps in and buys all the, let's just say for a quick one, the JCPenney boxes, and then hooks up with Amazon and creates, they could do two things. They could do, a Whole Food store, and then they can also do a distribution and pickup center. So it creates a whole new class of real estate within an existing retail box. So that's the repurposing that we really feel is going to become, a very hot segment of the market.
But what else, if I could just jump in on some of the repurposing of the retail big box, like for example, like a Broadway mall in Hicksville. You're right by probably the most major train station on Long Island, walking distance. You have a mall that was an open mall that became a closed mall. They've got numerous big boxes that, are now dark. A perfect, replacement use would be multifamily, market rate multifamily. So that sort of lies into land use and different townships and villages and zoning. So there needs to be an education of the elected officials. There needs to be education of, the residents of these areas, of the benefits of this. Like Mark and John, Meisner, Park down in Boca and City Place, where you have, multi-use. I think that would be a good reuse of some of the big box retail up here.
Yeah. The perfect example you could give is Sears right now in Hicksville, going through a rezoning and a replanning as a multifamily kind of destination with walking distance to the train.
John, let's talk about multifamily, because before the pandemic, obviously multifamily was just about the strongest, that and industrial was just about the strongest sector. And I wonder, has multifamily held up, or has the pandemic hurt it? Because there's a couple of things at play here. You have the people trying to escape density. So you know, some of the multifamily buildings in the city with elevators and stuff like that that are very dense, people are trying to escape. Of course, a lot of the multifamily out here is more of the garden apartment style, where it's a little less crowded. And then there's the rent problem. A lot of people haven't been able to pay their rent. So is multifamily still as strong as it was before, John?
So there is a lot of interest, and there is a lot of equity that is looking to get placed in multifamily, and the impact as it relates to renters, and of course correspondingly to owners and then to lenders, is I don't think we fully realized that yet because of the backstopping of the Fed, all the capital that they brought into the marketplace.
Right.
So and you know, they've taken a posture of pretty much whatever it takes. Now, obviously, in recent weeks and what have you, they're trying to work through. You know, we had the executive order from President Trump over the weekend to extend the unemployment. But I don't think we've fully realized the impact of that as it relates to, let's say, the C and B multifamily. And of course, you could kind of extend that out to every asset class within the multifamily sector. But we've seen collections hold up pretty well, very well, as a matter of fact. Some cases a little better, some cases a little worse. But you know, certainly as compared to retail, we've seen the owner collections hold up very, very well. And we anticipate that will continue for the foreseeable future. So we do have a lot of equity looking for those deals. So whether they be A, B, or C kind of assets, the challenge is today, if you're a seller, is how you're valuing that, or how you're looking at those valuations. Or what do you anticipate the valuations? We haven't really seen cap rates move on that at all.
Right.
You know, it's been pretty static.
John, could you just briefly expand on that? Just talk about cap rates and talk about why multifamily is such a desired asset class in terms of an investment.
Sure. So yeah, I think, you know, what it comes down to is that, you know, obviously particularly on Long Island, there's still a significant undersupply of affordable rental apartments. And obviously there've been some luxury apartments that have been developed. And there's some great developers and owners and operators of properties that are doing a fantastic job. So because of the lack of supply and the proximity to the city and the tech base that's Long Island, the workforce that's here, the demographics that we have, it's made it a very attractive asset class. It's always been, Mark and I have been working in the multifamily sector for over 30 years. So it's always been a very, very strong asset class. And, you know, I think that what it comes down to is people need a roof over their head. They need to, you know, supermarkets and apartments and housing, right? So, you know, we can see other asset classes, and we deal with all the ones that we're discussing here today. And I have to say that March and April, you know, of course, all of us in the industry, we're trying to figure out what's going on and what will the impact be. We still don't know what that will ultimately look like, but I think that everybody here, and I think that industry-wide, people feel that we're going to figure this out as a country and globally. So, you know, I think that what's being considered is we're working on some multifamily development deals, and when we talk to the developers, they're like, you know, it's going to take on Long Island a period of time to get approvals, and then it's going to take me a period of time to build. So 4 or 5 years out, best case scenario, what have you, you know, hopefully COVID is long gone and the economy is coming back and the demand is there. So,
just let's talk about rents for a second, because in the two sectors we were discussing, multifamily and industrial, rents and sale prices keep increasing, and they've increased even throughout the pandemic. So you have, you know, higher rents and higher lease prices and higher sale prices in industrial, and the same for multifamily. But Dave, in office, the rents have been relatively stable for like the last 2 decades. Why is that, and how does that affect the office market?
Well, you know, the industrial market is just as tight as the multifamily market. There's, you know, if you're in a high cube, you're like at a 2% vacancy. So 2% is statistically zero vacancy.
I'm sorry, just for the lay people, what's a high cube?
So high cube is high ceilings in the warehouse where, so typically Long Island has not been a high cube market because we were sort of like a Grumman facility developed, and ceiling heights were 16 feet or so. Maybe that was high back then, 14 to 16. So now the high cube, like for example, 344 Duffy Avenue. It's a building that that we sold the land to a developer. He built a 200,000 square foot building. He signed the lease with Home Depot. You know, rents are about $15.50 a square foot triple net. That's going to trade at like a 4%, you know, in the range of a 4% cap, which puts you over $350 a foot. You know, multifamily is, you know, exactly what John says. We're upside down with supply demand. As soon as the stick goes up that there's construction happening, they're a third rented just from people calling up on the sign. What we're going to see is where the office, the residential, and the industrial come together is projects like the Ronkonkoma Hub, you know, where Tritech is doing like a Station Square. So that's sort of like what we were talking about, Mark, with like the Meisner Park, City Place, you know, and the Seritage piece in Hicksville. So that's the next evolution of real estate, is these hubs, which is live, work, play. And again, when we have that, we now have a, we're on par with Jersey City, we're on par with Connecticut that have these transit-oriented type developments. So, you know, I've been doing this 30 years as well, and for the first 20, we kept hearing about all the problems of Long Island, and at least the last 10, we're actually doing something about it. So we're very, very bullish on that. So to tie it back to the office, is where the office market the rents need to go up, because in order to build a new building, right, you need to get almost $40 a foot in rent in order to support new construction. So rents are approaching that in Melville. They're like that in Garden City. There are different nodes that it's in, but for the most part, David, you're right, they have not moved dramatically. But in order to provide the type of workspace that we need to provide here now, you're going to start to see that kiss that $40 mark.
Hey, Dave, can I ask you a quick question?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so Dave, have you seen any of the hub and spoke activity taking place that we've been hearing about with office users out of the city looking for satellite offices in the suburbs, specifically, of course, Long Island?
Yes. So there's been numerous, you know, they're sort of feeling their way if they are going to vacate the city and, you know, locate an office out here, an office in Jersey, an office in Connecticut or Westchester, you know, where their employees are coming from, or are they going to just create a location for, you know, keep the office, the Manhattan location. So we're still sort of feeling that out. There hasn't been any large leases signed yet, you know, with that, because you know, as Jeff was saying, we're sort of like still in the smoke and fire here, and we're not really just, you know, able to see how this is going to transpire. But Long Island is, I think, in all of our sectors, you know, retail, you know, was something that was having an issue before COVID, but the rest of it, we're very strong.
Yes.
Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, just comment on the fact you got rising sale prices and rising lease prices in industrial, but for the last, I don't know, really long time on Long Island, it was only the end user that was interested in buying or leasing, you know, I mean, buying industrial. Has that changed because of the price increase, or is it still basically end users? Are there investors coming back into the industrial market, Jeff?
That's an excellent question. Users, as the rents go up, users basically have to pay the increases, or they're going to relocate out of state. That's a new reality. I think more importantly, the higher rents have served as an invitation for the investment community. High rents mean high income streams. This dynamic, coupled with low interest rates, has put enormous pressure on property values, on cap rates. What a cap rate is basically the net operating income divided by the property's value. So lower cap rates mean much higher, higher prices, right? So with the higher income and low interest rates, cap rates, as Dave was just saying, in some cases it can go as low as 4%. That's unusual. He actually mentioned a number of $350 a foot. I don't want anybody to think that's a new reality on Long Island. That's an anomaly. But the investment community has definitely come to Long Island in a major way. What they're looking for are value-added development opportunities, or highly functional industrial distribution centers, which, as Dave was saying, that means high cubes, high ceilings. The days of the 12 to 14-foot ceilings are gone. This is no longer a manufacturing environment. Today, 24 feet is an absolute minimum for new construction. Some are going as high as 40 and 50 feet. They want good loading. They want parking to accommodate their vans, because you have these last mile guys who need to distribute locally. And they want well-located buildings that can accommodate basically the wants and needs of e-commerce, which means being along the Long Island Expressway.
And you guys can see over the last year or so, the big sales they've had on industrial property, as much as $2 million an acre, which is astounding,
Yes.
For Long Island. And you have guys, like Lincoln Equities coming out. You have guys, some national firms. You have the 100 acres in Pine Lawn. That's I think some out-of-state firms are looking at that. You have the land out in EPCAL, which is going to be sold this year. I think Dave's on that deal. But the sea change in the value of industrial has been enormous.
That's correct. It's a function of supply and demand.
A big
Simple
part of
as
it
that.
too, Dave, is that the institutional investors are taking a sharp look at the industrial market on Long Island. As Jeff was saying, the demographics here are so strong and the distribution points are so strong that when you hit the hot buttons for an institutional investor, which as we talked about earlier, is the high ceiling heights, proximity to the Long Island Expressway. When you check off the boxes, the cap rates are really driven down, which means the prices are driven up. John and I, our experience over the last few years with the multifamily market, where we were taking a lot of properties that were built in the late 60s, early 70s, and selling those into the market that had not seen a lot of capital going into those, as many of the properties on the multifamily side were privately owned. They were families, they were smaller owners who might have one or two properties. We brought those properties to market and exposed them to a bunch of different types of investors. And when investors would come to Long Island and see the supply and demand inequality, and then realize that they would have as much as 3 to 4% rent growth each year if they were willing to invest capital in and do renovations and bring those properties up to what everybody wants today, which are the amenities that people look for. They want to see a swimming pool. They want to see a clubhouse. They want to see the Sub-Zero. They want to see a marble countertop. They want good parking. As Long Island starts to transition into more of an A-type market for both the industrial and multifamily, retail is always come along. The retail market for the A properties has always been very strong. Right now, we're in a period of transition. No one's really sure how that's going to play out. But I think, Dave and Jeff and John and I have experienced, if you build a Class A property today, the demand from the institutional side of the investment market is still very strong. And what Jeff was talking about on the older properties for the industrial, if you've got 14-foot or 16-foot ceilings, that becomes an investment play for more of the local people. There's still going to be plumbers. There's still going to be electricians and carpenters. They're going to need their 2,000, 3,000 square foot box, with 14-foot ceilings. That's a very strong investment market right now. And that's the uniqueness of Long Island. We're a very strong market on a lot of different levels.
One of
Can
the
you
other,
jump in, please, just for a
Go ahead,
second?
Joe.
Let's talk about residential for just a second, okay? And again, a question from a non-real estate expert. I'm looking to move to a nicer apartment, but I don't need a swimming pool. And I don't need a clubhouse. I wouldn't go. I'm confused. I know an awful lot of people like me on Long Island who are just looking to either get out of their houses or to move into a decent apartment that's affordable for a single person. Why is it that that's virtually impossible here when you're saying that, one, you need to educate David Panetta said that you need to educate the town of Oyster Bay, specifically in the Sears question, don't we? Because they don't seem to get it. And secondly, we don't seem to have any of this big investment money looking for what you call market price, market investment. Could we just address why is there no housing for my aunt and uncle, and why is there no housing for normal people, who are not moving here from Manhattan?
Yeah,
used
that's a
to
good
paying
question.
$4,000 a month.
That's a good question. There's a couple of things. We're not an institutional market. We've held out. For our office, the top owners is RXR, Ware Associates, LIBN, Tritech. For industrial, it's Reckler Equities, Wolkoff, Lastrito. These are all local people, not institutions. So we're still controlled by, I don't want to say mom and pops because these are very big local companies, but they're local companies. On the residential side, we're like 100,000 units upside down. So there's 100,000 more units needed. We're not 2,000 units off. We're 100,000. So when something goes up, they're renting for $3,000, $4,000. In Great Neck, $8,000 a month. So if we're allowed to produce and develop more units, right? Supply demand. You increase the supply, the demand comes down. But Joe, you're a little bit in luck because I'm going to give you an example in Huntington Station. So in Huntington Station, there was a small, on Fifth Avenue, there was I forgot how many units, maybe it was 100 units, that was there. Avalon came on. So Avalon was charging $3,000 a month. So the owner, it's Eagle, you guys know the name.
Eagle Rock.
Eagle Rock. So what Eagle Rock said, hey, this guy's getting 3,000, I'm getting 1,000. Let me put money into my B-class apartment complex. So now and then he goes and he'll charge you 2,000 instead of 3,000, but he just doubled his income. So you're going to see the B-class stuff move up and start filling in that gap where you can have people like yourself, Joe, that don't need the pool, the barbecue pit, the gym, the clubhouse.
Not going to the gym either, just FYI. Okay?
No worries.
So that's going to happen.
And there is some of that product today, and obviously almost every new development, I think every new development will have a workforce housing component to it. Mark and I have worked on some larger projects that are workforce housing. We've completed those. For a retiree, let's say, that is looking for something that is affordable, there are 55 and over communities that target that specific demographic. But one of the resonating traits of this conversation that we're having today is supply and demand. We are an island. We have finite land area, which is a great thing and a bad thing. But when it comes to supply and demand, as Dave points out, we're so upside down on multifamily that we'll see some repurposing of, whether it's Seritage, Sears in Hicksville, or some of these other retail properties. We'll see some multifamily coming about, and it will feel like, what, do we need all of this? And for a while, we may question that, but the answer is we don't want younger people moving away. We want to keep the population here and attract people. So, we need to
John,
have,
on the flip side of that, Dave brought up Eagle Rock in Huntington Station, and that was a value add opportunity. And that's on the other side of this. So on commercial real estate, we're talking about investors and how they can make money off of this stuff. Could you just explain the value add proposition and why that's so sought after? And is there much left on Long Island for that?
well, there certainly is going to be, I think, as we try to repurpose some of this retail. We're still seeing demand for supermarket essential services. Those businesses, we're seeing creative business owners, whether they be restaurants in the municipalities, how they're dealing with outdoor dining, or SoulCycle having outdoor cycling classes. It generates a lot of buzz. So we're seeing retailers adapt the best way they can through this period. How long this period goes on for, we don't know. The full impact on retail, we don't know. But I think that everybody seems to feel that we will continue to see a decline in retail tenants, not just on Long Island, but throughout the nation, as online retailing becomes more and more impactful. And certainly through COVID, I think we've all seen how that's changed also. The value point of it, Dave, and the attraction is, people want to make money. They want to chase yield, right? So if you can add value through repurposing something, whether it's multifamily, office, industrial, what have you, you can take an older building. If the market is there, supply and demand, you can create value. You'll get better returns for your investors, whether they be institutional or private.
Right.
When
Okay.
you're going to see also that if you notice the Hart's Mountain came in and bought the Newsday site. So Hart's Mountain, a lot of people don't know them here on Long Island, but they own 40 million square feet of commercial space in Jersey. And they're used to that high cube, wide column spacing. So all of that, is beneficial to, to these distribution users. And even David, you were mentioning, the EPCAL site. They can build 9.8 million square feet out there. And that's going to go, in my opinion, in 10 deals of about 1 million square feet. That's how tight the market is. And we've been talking, we've been working on this for 5 years already. Hopefully it's coming to a conclusion in the next couple of months. But we've been talking to numerous users that are just waiting for 1 million square feet to pop up someplace. And we need that here. We need the jobs, the tax base. And this residential part is a key part of this, because real estate 101, I've said this before, employers go where the employees are. So as we start retaining our youth here, you're going to have the major employers come here. And really, that's how Long Island is sustained for all these years.
One of the bright spots of the office market for the last several years has been the medical office market. You're seeing a lot of buildings being bought up to be either redeveloped for medical use, or the medical offices that already exist are trading for a much higher price than regular office space. So after a while, people say, well, that's already oversaturated. We have enough medical, but it seems to continue to grow. Do you see an end to that, or is that just going to keep happening? And why is that such a big phenomenon right now?
Well, you reported on a deal we just closed a couple of weeks ago, which was the old King Cullen headquarters in Bethpage on Seafood Oyster Bay Expressway and Central Avenue. So that was a 60,000 square foot site. You were able to expand that site, and that went to, a medical user. So now that's 60,000 plus square foot out of the supply for office space, which makes the office space the office market tighter. Again, we need to get the Wyandanch Rising development. One of the reasons why that hasn't moved forward, not that there wasn't interest there, but since you need to build a new building, you need to get that 37, the $40 a foot in rent. And it was tough to get that in Wyandanch when you can get it cheaper in Melville right now. But we're going to see that climb.
Right. Right. Dave, you made a good point before too about educating the officials and so forth in the various municipalities across the island, because John and I are getting ready to bring a piece of property out that's a phenomenal piece of property that's going to require a rezoning, and it's a unique property in that it would be a phenomenal multifamily site. It would also be a great industrial site, and the way the medical office buildings are expanding and that medical need is expanding across the market, you could probably work that type of a development into it. The problem that you face when we go back to Joe's question before about, why can't I find a nice place to live? I don't want a gym. I don't want a swimming pool. Immediately when you come out and you say, hey, I'm going to build some multifamily, the biggest opponent to the multifamily development on Long Island is the school districts. Right. They don't want more kids. So you say, okay, well, you know what? I'll do a 55 and over. I won't put any kids in the school. Well, we don't want the traffic. Okay, well, I'm going to do an industrial building. I don't want the big trucks. It's nonstop. It's too much of the don't build it here. So what happens is the companies leave Long Island, the tax base is depleted, and you're going round and round in circles.
Well, that's why
the education is the most important thing. And the other trick, Dave, is you need to have on Long Island, you almost have to have the IDA, the Industrial Development Agency, involved in every new construction project, or the taxes will prevent you from making an economic deal that makes development possible.
It's, there's two things we can do as professionals. All of us have been doing this for 30 years. I chose to be part of the solution. I'm on the Huntington Planning Board. Jeff was formerly mayor of the village of Roslyn Estates. We need to get involved, people that have expertise, that know cause and effect and know how this stuff works. We've got to put ourselves out there to help. All of us do. The other thing is on the school district issue. So I'm on the board of the Real Estate Institute at Stony Brook. And we did a study that came out last year that looked back 15 years, looked at new complexes that were market rate, 200 units and above. And we found out that you need 11 units to make one school-age kid.
Right.
So
a lot less impactful than people realize.
Yes,
far less impactful. The other point that bears noting here, and I know that everybody here has talked about this. We haven't discussed it in this panel discussion today, but are the septic needs for these developments, particularly the family.
And that's sewers.
Expansion of sewer districts.
Definitely.
All this requires capital. Obviously, we're in a very tight environment where, municipalities they need every dollar they could get their hand on. I'm sure that it's going to be years before we see the kind of expansion that Long Island deserves and needs to be able to compete with some of these other projects. But it's certainly something that we all have to be mindful of and figure out a solution to.
We have a couple of questions from viewers. I'll just throw them out there. Ron Gold wants to know what the percentage of office tenants paid rent in June and July. I don't know if any of you guys know that. I think ABLI did a survey, and I think they found that most of the office tenants did pay the rent, but I don't know if you guys could answer that question.
Yeah, it was between 90 and 95%. It was a high percentage.
So office tenants are paying their rents. And there's another question here. And this is from an environmental consultant. They want to know that if buyers are paying cash for properties and not relying on borrowing or lending institutions, are they missing having that environmental assessment that they need to have, that the banks and the lenders require them to have, and is that a problem?
No, I can tell you in the industrial world, today buyers are fairly educated. And the world of environmental challenges and issues, that's out there. It's been out there for 20 years. So whether the bank requires it or not, and whether there's a bank involved or not, we have very rarely seen a deal that's not subject to environmental.
Right, right. John and I have closed about 23 deals so far this year. Every single deal had an environmental done. Just like Jeff said, you know, it's standard practice. Standard practice. Whether you're using a lender or not, you really want to know what you're buying, and that's a very important factor. Good question.
So David, you could say to the person who wrote that question, are you going to be more careful if you're using your money or more careful if you're using the bank's money? I think you'd be more careful using your own money.
It's a good point.
Yep, that's a good one. So let's turn to the future. You know, we talked about how the market was up until the pandemic, and through the pandemic. Obviously, there was a big pause in March and April. Activity was basically suspended. Same thing in the residential market, which I've been reporting on. The spring market kind of just got pushed into the summer, and now they're having record sales because they had very little sales in March and April. So I feel that you guys, the activity, either you're seeing it already or you're going to be seeing it really soon, like the floodgates are opening. Talk about that, and talk about the near future, the next 6 months, or what you think is coming up in all of your sectors. And whoever wants to start, just go ahead. Jeff? John?
Jeff, you want to go? Jeff, you start.
Yeah, just very briefly. In the industrial sector, we believe demand is going to continue strong and probably grow. That could be a little optimistic, but we think in this case, bad news could be good news. If there's a second wave of this thing, when you balance these things out, we see more companies that are benefiting from it than are getting hurt by it. Some are getting hurt. We've had some subleases from companies that don't need the facilities, but we've had strong demand from other companies looking to jump into those larger facilities from where they're coming from. So we're very optimistic on the next 6 months.
And with the dismantling of the post office, I'm assuming that private delivery services that cater to the big last mile places, they're just going to, they're going to reap the benefits. I know we had a delivery at the house the other day that we bought something online, and it was Postmates, which is, I believe, being bought by Uber. It's gig economy, and it's like last mile delivery. So I'm assuming that the delivery services will benefit.
Good point.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's correct.
Okay.
So I'll take Mark. I'll take multifamily. You could take retail. With multifamily, I think what we'll see. We're going to have to see what happens on the rental stream side, and that I think is going to be dictated in the next 4, 6, 12 months by the asset class. I think C properties that are characteristically more working class properties will be under more pressure on rents, on rent collections. B properties probably flat. A properties we might be flat to an uptick on rents. So in terms of investor demand and sales, we Mark and I still see a lot of interest from lenders. Very aggressive in terms of some aspects of their loan packages that they're putting out. Obviously not every lender, but there are certain lenders that are very, very aggressive. So when you look at a normalized cap rate that we've been looking at, it's been pretty static. We're not seeing really any feel for any increase on cap rates or lowering of prices. The demand is there for the product type. There's debt that's available for it, and attractive debt. So, and there's plenty of equity chasing those things. So the uncertainty, I think we can look at the stock market, right? Everybody looks at why is the stock market back to where it was, and people are saying 2020, forget about it. A lot of people are looking at 21, 22, 23. And I think that as it relates to real estate, we advise our clients to have a long-term perspective. You might make a lot of money in the short term, but if you're going in relying solely on that, you could get your head handed to you if you don't have a long-term perspective. So we always advise our clients that way. And we feel these asset classes that we're talking about today, The most vulnerable one being retail. It's going to work, we're going to work through the issues that are here. Once again, Long Island, finite geographic land area, the areas, things are going to get repurposed. Municipalities need a tax base. These things will get figured out.
Mark, you want to address the retail, the future?
Sure. The retail is probably the most challenged asset class, not just on Long Island, but across the country. I think the Long Island retail class is slowly adjusting to the new reality. I think the towns and villages are being very proactive in trying to reignite the retail markets by, closing off streets to cars at night and having, the restaurants being able to come out into the street and serve food, trying to drive the traffic back into the downtowns and so forth. The mall next to our office, Walt Whitman Mall, opened up about a month ago, and I'm astonished at the number of cars that are there and so forth. So I think it's going to come back very slowly. In terms of, the landlords themselves who are, faced with making mortgage payments, they're challenged in that, they're not collecting rents because they're trying to work out and keep tenants alive, basically. And when you have the national retailers and so forth filing bankruptcy and the rents going away for a lot of the landlords, there needs to be a focus on the landlord's debt situation. How are things going to be handled in that mortgage market? There is, the government is looking at possibly working with the CMBS market, which is commercial mortgage-backed securities, which is where a lot of the loans are sold off to, and that might be a different subject for another time. But I think the retail is going to be very selectively coming back, and I think the people that are the most proactive in terms of working with their landlords and working with their customers to create that feeling of safety, number one, and the feeling of, it's okay to come back and spend some money in the store. I think that's going to be very important going forward. And we're starting to really see that and feel it.
Dave, office going forward?
Yeah, so there's basically three things, and I'll give you examples of each. So buildings with the whole COVID thing, COVID's not going to be the last issue. It wasn't the first issue. Certainly it's been a major one. But buildings, it's very expensive to rip out air conditioning, to rip out elevators, redesign buildings so that they're more COVID friendly, or employee friendly. But if you have a building like CLK's 275 Broad Hollow Road, there's a building that Capital One was in. They gutted the entire building, gutted the elevators, going through all the mechanicals. So they have an opportunity now to put, virus and bacteria-resistant wall coverings, to have elevator switch work where you put your hand over, up or down without having to actually touch a button. And then the same thing when you go in the elevator, having a more higher level HVAC system that filters out viruses. So you're going to see buildings that are in that situation are able to lease up higher. They're going to get higher rents. The next thing is if you have office buildings like a 515 Broad Hollow Road, that's included in amenities. So 2 restaurants, a gym, pickleball, golf, swim. Those are now, again, going into a live, work, play environment in a building scenario. But then if you go into, like we were saying, Station Square, which is Tritech's development over in Ronkonkoma, that now is a ground up development. There's residential there. They can build that whole live, work, play tied into the Ronkonkoma train station. Those are going to be the type of things, that are strong. And just one last thing on the industrial side, like the EPCAL piece, there's 2 airstrips, there's freight rail, there's sewer treatment plant. They're going to be high Q buildings. Long Island needs to be reinvented. We were a very, very strong 50s, 60s, 70s, economy. We need to do this now for the 2030. We just need to reinvent ourselves a little bit.
We do have a viewer question. How do you see the impending IDA prevailing wage issue affecting the multifamily market going forward? And I'm sure that's the new development.
Sure. So there's certainly some concern with the developers that we work with, just in terms of the impact. Obviously, developers need to make a profit. That's, they're encouraged. This is why we have IDA. Land costs are high. If prevailing wage, when prevailing wage is in, that's going to impact their budgets. So it will be impactful. Obviously we don't know what's going to happen. Interest rates, I'm not sure how much lower they could go, how capital stack requirements change, their investor capital, what that might look like. And ultimately it may come down to putting pressure on pricing of the land.
Gentlemen, we're just about running out of time, and I just want to close with one very quick question for all of you. If you could tell me in a sentence what it is, how confident you are about the future here of real estate in general on Long Island, what would that one sentence be? Mark?
On one sentence, I would say that I am extremely confident that Long Island will work itself through the issues that are facing us on all asset classes. I think the quickest recovery for all asset classes will be the municipality's ability to work with the developers and change some of these prohibitive zoning and issues that face us. That's probably the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. John?
So I think that, while we can't look solely at our historic perspective, we certainly can use that as a baseline. We've got a lot of talented people on Long Island in the New York metro area. We have a need. We need to figure this out, and we have resources. So, I don't think that there's anybody here that feels that COVID will remain with us. We're adapting. Businesses are adapting. We're working through our new reality, and I think ultimately, I'm very confident that we'll be fine as Long Island development and as consumers and residents of Long Island and businesses.
Jeff?
I think I'm very bullish that the industrial market will continue to be strong on Long Island. The only concern I have perhaps is if interest rates start to climb. I think that'll have a fairly significant impact, particularly on the investment interest on Long Island, because interest rates up, cap rates up, prices drop. So other than that, I think it's I'm feeling very good about industrial on Long Island.
And David?
So, I'm as optimistic as everyone else, but real estate is not isolated onto itself. And the next big issue that's coming down the pike is November 4th. So depending on what happens there, which will affect interest rate, debt rates, taxes, everything else going forward, that could be something that could be another disruptor in a recovery. But Long Island has the structural assets right now. We've got low vacancy rates and everything except for retail, which just needs to be reinvented a bit. So I think on the long term, we're still sitting very, very well.
Gentlemen, you guys were great. Okay, we're getting a lot of really fine feedback from our viewers who thought this was extremely informative, as I do. Thank you so much for answering our questions and being a part of this. For everyone here, thank you again. And for everyone at LIBN and on behalf of David Winslerberg, I'm Joe Dowd. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe and good luck.
Thank you all for attending this week's episode of LIBN Now. Don't forget to join us next week for a special security episode of LIBN Now presented by Squad Security. To see past episodes or to submit your question ahead of time, go to libn.com/libnow. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.